Thank you, Chair. So, as the portfolio holder for adult social care, it's got the largest budget after education, and obviously the first place to go to try and save money. At the moment, we've already agreed a saving plan of, is it 1.8 million, or 8% of the budget. It's a massive amount of money and will take a lot of achieving. And as with children's care, many of the parts of our service are uncontrollable. We don't know what's coming through the door. We don't know how many people we're going to have to support in their for their social care, increasing older age, etc. So those parts of the budget are very difficult to control, and it's with a lot of effort that it's managed. So it means if the additional savings have to come from somewhere, and if they have to come from adult social care, it means the areas that I am particularly passionate about, the areas that make Rutland stand out. So things like the Active Together referrals from GPs, the social prescribing budget for the vulnerable with mental health problems, the support for carers in the community, all these things that are exceptional in Rutland. Now, I also would argue that, yes, we need to get fit and we need to have ways of being fit, but do we need a gym? There's lots of research, and it's really interesting, the research, and the more I read it, the more I thought, oh. So we have between 19% of men and 26% of women are physically inactive. They do nothing. I also was quite surprised with my past history that physical inactivity leads to as many deaths as smoking. We're also affected by socioeconomics. So the lower your socioeconomic group as a youngster, the less likely you are to do sports. They cost too much money. We know also that life expectancy in Rutland is increasing, but at a cost, particularly for older women. And women in particular fail to engage in physical activity. There's research that says they don't like going to gyms. They don't like being in an environment like that. There are issues of religious restriction, gender segregation, modesty. And there's also support from Sport England to increase the number of LGBTQ plus people involved in sport. It is still homophobic. So the question is, what sort of sport is best? Is there one that gives you the most benefit? Yes, there is. And as we probably all know, it's brisk walking, which is free. Or swimming, which isn't. That's another issue. Jogging, cycling, dancing, but walking tops the list everywhere. So we know that gyms have a definite role, but they provide facilities for the limited few, and it excludes people for reasons of body image, as I said earlier, ethnic sensitivity and cost. So if we have no money, why are we funding a gym? So should we be, as the Health Education in England suggests, prioritising walking, cycling routes, programmes that ensure free, low-cost, family-friendly physical activities in the community using outdoor gyms, parks and other green spaces. We live on the edge of Rutland Water. We have a fantastic resource there. Why are we not encouraging that? We don't need to go to a gym to get fit. We need to encourage people. And actually quite interesting, statistics published in 2021, the latest ones I could find, the miles walked per person is at its highest since 2002. The number of people involved in park run around Rutland Water is gaining support. So if it meant that we were going to be closing some of these really good adult social care facilities and keeping a gym open, I would say, no, we can find the exercise somewhere else.
There are a number of my areas that were up for consideration. Transport services, highways, licensing and regulatory, and environment and waste are all well dealt with in the paper, and I don't intend going into further detail. The areas that I fought passionately for, and which are now up for consideration, are the flood officer and sustainability officer. I made promises in a public meeting that I would fight to stop flooding in this county. And yet I cannot put my hand on my heart and say that we can, if we take the decision to fund the leisure contract, that we can keep that flood officer. Let me explain some of the implications. We will drop to doing the bare minimum as a lead local flood authority. We will be doing less than we have been doing to date because there are other pressures on highways. Our highways officers will continue to have to support planning. I found out yesterday that the regulations on SUDs, sustainable urinal drainage systems, change once a quarter. Our highways officers have to be on top of that to be able to fulfil the need of the planning department. In addition, if we do not deal with planning in a timely way, under new regulations, we have to give the planning fees back. That's a double whammy. So we could be losing money. Highways will have to deal with that. They will not have the spare capacity to deal in a proactive way to mitigate future flood events, which is what I and officers had hoped this flood officer would be able to do. And I know a number of ward councillors hoped this flood officer would be able to do. And I know we stood at that special council meeting and said we hoped we would be able to do. In a similar way, the climate change officer, our sustainability officer, might seem a strange one to feel passionate about. We won't single-handedly halt climate change by planting a few trees in Rutland, but the biggest job for local authorities is to be able to mitigate the effects of climate change. It is already happening, and we have a county, we have residents, and we have an economy that need protecting. We need a coordinated effort to protect that. We need to sustain our way of life and our economy. For example, the local area energy plan would be led by this individual with its potential economic and climate benefits. The impact of the loss of these two posts will be felt across Rutland. It was not a choice to pick the most emotive. I can assure you I would not put these two forward. But a choice to pick the posts that will not cause redundancies or ongoing loss of savings to the council. But people will feel very let down after promises we made, many of which I made. But neither area is statutory, and if council feels the leisure centre must be funded, very regrettably, I can see no other choice. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does anybody want to come back in light of what Councillor Wise has said? Okay. At the beginning of this debate, I pointed everybody to 1.3.3, the criteria that were used to create the justifications that were in the paper and which you have all articulated this morning. In children's services, we heard that there is a demand increase and there is also a need for investing to save. within Councillor Brown's area, we hear that there are new duties in planning and a very high need to invest to save in the cultural area, given that we are aiming to remove the subsidy from that. In Councillor Ellison's area, we hear again about increased demand, and we also hear about cost increases. And in addition, Councillor Ellison also highlighted for us, in terms of health and well-being, the relative priorities of walking, swimming, cycling and so on, compared with what is actually a very limited usage of gymnasia. And I don't mean just the one centre, I mean across the piece. Councillor Johnson explained why it wasn't just a question of using reserves. He explained very clearly that our reserves are being earmarked as investment to achieve transformation or to deal with very specific activities. Councillor Wise also indicated that there are parts of her portfolio that shouldn't be touched, and she also articulated quite clearly why cutting this proposal, the climate change officer, not investing, rather more accurately, in the climate change officer and the flooding officer, but instead investing in leisure, is not a wise action and will not deliver the best outcomes for the majority of people, because an awful lot of people will be impacted by the work of the climate change and flood activity, compared with how relatively few people will be impacted by investment in the management of Catmose Sports Centre. Nevertheless, having said all of that, Council will want a steer from Cabinet, and as Councillor Wise indicated, the two areas that have least pain if we are to invest in Catmose are the climate change and the flooding, because in neither case will we be making our staff redundant, because we have not utilised that funding, as it only came in at the beginning of this month, because it was the budget that was set in January for 24-25 financial year. So I would like to suggest that in addition to the recommendation on the paper, we add the following. Cabinet recognises that in order to finance the management of Catmose Leisure Centre, significant budgetary provision must be found. Cabinet considers that the only viable option is to redirect funding allocated for flood management and the climate change officer to leisure services for management of Catmose Leisure Centre. I am proposing it. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Could I see who would be prepared to support that added to the recommendation we approved earlier? That's unanimous.
That's unanimous, Chair.
So the recommendation now reads, well, I don't think I need to read it. I've just read the addendum bit, and it was what is on your paper plus what I have just read. So that in its totality, I will propose. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Brown. All in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. And I think we have passed that with extremely heavy hearts. But Council will consider, and clearly Council may come to a different conclusion. Thank you.